to this segment of the series of Legends in Recreation and Parks, sponsored by the American Academy for Park and Recreation Administration. I'm Tony Mobley from Indiana University. My colleague today is Ron Dodd from the Joliet Park District, and we are here to interview, have a conversation with Ford Hughes, Vice President of the James Foundation in St. James, Missouri. Ford, we're glad to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
Tell us about how you became interested in park and recreation initially, Ford.
Tony, many years ago, I was always interested in wildlife, natural resources, this part of life, and I wound up being a vocational education teacher. And the future looked rather drab at the time, and I ran into an organization called the James Foundation, you just mentioned, and put my bid in for a job. 13 years later, I accepted a job with them, St. James, operating a huge reserve of land, a wildlife refuge, and a recreation area that was undeveloped.
What was that first job for?
First job was a park superintendent. I lived on the area, and I did everything from clean the toilets to pick up the trash to run a crew of men. I did some engineering, and I didn't know that Parks and Recreation at that time had such higher echelons that I learned how to get into. But from the grassroots, brother, I came from the grassroots, and learned many things that to operate a park and what required without going to school for it. Now, that's not to say that I didn't try to get another education, which I did. I worked very closely with the University of Missouri in their Park and Recreation Department, picking up subjects and learning some landscape engineering from another firm, and to prepare myself more for the job I was doing.
Yeah.
So you feel there's some value then in getting in on the ground floor, so to speak, with regard to having a professional career in Parks and Recreation management?
Ron, from my point of view, the answer would be absolutely yes. Although we graduated some very brilliant students, and students who immediately grasp the situations, whatever they may be. But there's nothing like, in my opinion, where people are involved to be like people. In other words, you've got 10 people one day, you've got 100 people another day, and one day you've got 1,000 people. Each of that requires a different level of thinking, logistically and preparation, and people to operate it. So absolutely, I'd say every student out of a college or a curriculum of park and recreation should have some internship with the hands-on grassroots learning from Parks and Recreation. Absolutely.
Take us back a little farther, Ford. Where's home? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in northeast Arkansas, and I'm really not ashamed of it.
No, okay. But you moved to Missouri.
Well, that was due to the fact that the Army took me away, and I took a job in California, to be honest with you, in Oakland, California. And there I was going to be a doctor, believe it or not. That was my first intention to be an MD. But the Army got me, and I wound up in Missouri and met the Queen of the Ozarks, and I got married, and that's where I stayed.
Stayed right there.
Yes.
Where did you go to school?
University of Missouri.
University of Missouri.
A master's degree in education and a BS in vocational education.
Vocational education was that original interest before you
That was my original
applied for the job at St. James?
Yes, right. I taught school 8 years in the state of Missouri, 2 different schools, and the town of St. James was near this park called Merrimack Spring Park, which means nothing probably to you, but it was this reserve left by family. Frontier Ironworks was there, real history of that area. The entire area was built around.
Well, both Ron and I have been to Merrimack Park, so tell our viewers a bit more about that park.
Okay. Well, immediately after I got out of the service in 46, I believe it was, I asked the gentleman who was then engineer if he needed a helper. He said, yes, come on out, and I helped her 50 cents an hour, believe it or not. I don't know if that's worth putting in here or not, but it was cheap wages.
Puts things in perspective, right?
To get out of the Army and get a job or something, it was real nice. So the land I learned was owned by the New York Community Trust from a fund set up by Lucy Wortham James, who was the granddaughter of the gentleman who run the ironworks. And there was 1,856 acres of land undeveloped, with a natural stream flowing through it about a mile and a half. And of course, above all was a spring, one of Missouri's 4th largest springs, Merrimack Spring, and that's why it's called Merrimack Spring Park. In from that area that day in '46, I helped the rod and did some of the layout work to lay out all the lines of what the park would be someday, not knowing I might wind up being superintendent. And that's how it really all got started. So I went on to teach school from 46 through 58, went to school and taught school. And I asked the man that I was working with, someday, if you need a park superintendent, give me a call. Believe it or not, in December of 1958, gee, that's a long time ago, he says, I want to talk to you, have lunch with me in New York. Well, that scared me to death. And
Have you been to New York before?
no, I went through on a train going to Camp Shanks to go to Europe, and that was about all I saw. But I did fly in on one of these 4-engine airplanes. I'd never been on an airplane before. It was quite an experience, and he took me around. Whenever he'd go to his office, and he told me what I thought about the job and so on, and that was all I said. I'd come back, and about a month later, he says, come back in and have lunch with me again. So it's going to be quite a habit, you know.
In New
So I
York
went in.
or in St. James?
Yes, we're in St. James.
No, but you lunch in New York or St.
Lunch
James?
in New York.
So you went back again?
Right, the second time. I was living in a place called Pike County, Missouri, outside of St. James at the time. This was 13 years after I started helping the health line at the Merrimack Spring Park. Anyway, I had some cattle at that time, and I think this is worth telling. In his room at the Central Park Avenue, the tower, number 120 he called it, I was sitting with my legs crossed usually, and I had cattle. And I always clean my shoes for 11. There's a little dry vinegar under there. And I did not know. And I was sitting in this 15-story, actually directly decorated room, and he says, I want you to go out there and do me a favor. I said, well, what's that? He said, I want you to start a tree program. I want to develop Merrimack. I want the town turned into a beautiful city called Forest City of the Ozarks. To me, a country boy knowing nothing about the business, I'm just a country boy. He looked at my shoes and said, it shows, son, it shows. Well, he finally got things pretty well going at that time. I felt a little more relaxed that this guy could have been a little humorous. Anyway, he hired me on the spot and called the gentleman in charge, and I went back and took over the work in the area there for 2 years. And then later, 2 years later, he calls and says, we've had such good progress, come in and have lunch with me again. My wife thought that was really something. I was getting called in New York from a little town where you have bakery goods for breakfast. It was something, so he gave me the job as the director of the organization.
Now, when was that?
1962.
62.
And the development program started. And everything that a park should have, I suppose, we designed it after a municipal setup. We tried to pick employees that had college education in the fields of interpretive studies, natural resources, and some maintenance, which at that time was very difficult to find a student with that many qualifications, to be honest with you.
Well, now, before you go on into that, take us back to that very first time you became the superintendent. Now, teaching vocational education is an excellent profession and a very worthwhile one, but you had some concept that you wanted to do something different. What did you understand a park to be all about at that time, and what did you want to do?
My entire life has been around working with people. I love people. And if I could get involved in church work, I spent my time organizing anything I could do to keep the kids or the people interested in church. Boy Scouts, Lions Club, anything that would keep me occupied working with people. And I saw this as an opportunity not only to really get involved with people, but do something that I thought I really loved and I would love to do. And I could visualize that park. The day I went out there, I could see a building here, I could see a building there, I could see the water taken care of better. Those things were the real factors that I decided I wanted to be a park superintendent, regardless of whether it paid enough to make a living or not. Fortunately, it did.
So you had these ideas in your head for the development of Merrimack Park. So did you just scratch them out on a napkin some morning with somebody, or did you do a formal planning process?
I told the gentleman, his name is Robert Elgin, who was a graduate civil engineer, who was doing the basic work in 1946. I said, if you ever need a park superintendent, I'd like to be your man. Why is that? Well, I said, listen, this is a place for people, it's run down, it could be a marvelous spot to bring a family. Kids can be left. It is often of the highway. It's wild, there's lots of wildlife, and it just seemed like the thing that I wanted to do. And he remembered all of that, and he said, he's the one who turned my name into the people in New York who own the property that I'd like to be the superintendent. And eventually it turned out that way.
Ron, I find it very interesting with all of our history on parks on one side and recreation on the other, that Ford came at this to work on park development, but with a commitment to people.
Right, that's interesting.
Well, this is the way I felt about it. I was interested in two phases. My father was an engineer, and I learned a great deal of civil engineering from him. And, he was a great forestry man. We used to own some land, and I knew trees, flowers, shrubs, and I kind of grew up in that sort of thing.
The other thing that I think is important to point out here is that you had this vision for Merrimack, which is what, 10 miles from the downtown?
6 miles.
6 miles.
Yeah.
But you've also done an excellent job of developing the in-city park, or the park where the library is and the pool. And maybe you could tell us how that all came about as well.
As the development, the first thing I did when I got involved, I had a master plan worked out for the 1,856 acres, which is the largest portion of our work. And we built from museums, stores, restaurants, camping. The whole thing has been done, all from a master set of plans. And then about mid-65, that part of the development was over, and the Merrimack would become very useful to people. We grew from, say, 55,000 to about 690,000 entries. You have to recall another phase of the program that happened a little later. But the gentleman in New York who I referred to as hiring me, Mr. Hayes, said, listen, over the telephone one day, why don't we build a park in St. James? I've been hoping he would say that because we had no swimming pool. We had no park at all, other than just a little small ballpark named after the little town mayor. And our town is only 3,000. And at that time, it was only 1,700. So we had very little of the amenities that makes a kid have a good time or provides a place for the family to go. So we had a 56-acre tract near the downtown part of St. James, and he said, what do you see out the window? I told him I saw a swimming pool. He said, what do you see? And I saw a quick parking lot. What do you see further? I said, I see some shelters, a ball diamond, and a tennis court. He said, build it. So out of that, of course, being a foundation, understand that this is not like going to a municipality. He trusted the facts that we'd already done, and then we went into building that program, and then we went into planting thousands of trees in this town to beautify it. Flower boxes, painting buildings, and doing things that he thought would turn it into a forest city of the Ozarks. And that was part of the legacy that the lady left, which is why we did this. But it all come together in a mesh form to form a unit that would make it one of the most best recreational spots in the state of Missouri.
Now, did all of that start at about the time you became the director?
Yes, sir, it did.
I think maybe it's important to point out, before we go any further, that you do not receive any tax money for this operation. Is that true?
That's
and
correct.
that, in fact, that the foundation is totally supporting this effort. And maybe you can talk about your annual operating budgets. You mentioned a little bit about your capital expenditures, but maybe let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's rather unique.
Okay.
And those of us that are in budget crunches a lot with tax-funded agencies maybe can be better for what you might be able to tell us in that regard.
Of course, being in the private sector where there is money is a great thing. It's too bad we all don't have that set up. But the money for this program was left in New York Community Trust in the sum at that time around $15 to $20 million. And we spent only 40% of that money. And those funds came in as we planned each project. They were made possible for it to grow. Our budget run from $75,000 back in 1955 up to $1,500,000 today. So we've come a long ways. You know, now we do make a certain amount of money, probably $500,000 a year, due to the tax situation, being a nonprofit. They permitted us to do that and provide a service for the people.
Now, that doesn't include capital investments, right?
No,
That's just your annual operating.
Right. Capital investments are a separate thing. We have funds set aside for that. Should we want to build another shelter? Should we want to build another program of rec center or something of that nature, basketball court, that comes out of a reserve fund, which we try to set back each year. We do have a And I'd say everybody should have reserve fund if you can get one.
So you basically report to a person in New York. Should we all be so lucky not to have a boss in our own hometown, right?
I've thanked the Lord many times.
Let's talk about that for a minute, not to belabor it, but let's talk about
Okay,
that for a second. I think
in
people might be interested.
62, being an individual involved 1,100 miles away from the source of funds, they become trustworthy of us. And I was put on their board in 1965 or 66, at which time gave me a voting right into the operation of the foundation. And they had a first-hand knowledge, and I felt even more related to being honest and factual and outgoing with their program, because I had a little leeway of authority there. And the money was never a problem. Let's see, there's another place, right?
Wouldn't it be nice to have a vote on the commissioners of Sherwood Park District?
Well, it was a unique situation, and it turned a small community into, and I know both of you have been there, and you've seen what a fine little community is. The foundation's been responsible for it, not particularly me.
What a tougher question,
Yes.
perhaps. How do the people of St. James feel about the James Foundation? Obviously, they're grateful and pleased that it's there, but there's got to be some feeling about that. Can you talk a little about
Yes.
that?
That's probably one of the disadvantages or poor factor of having a private supporter or being supported totally private. There's that percentage of people who doesn't want any change, and there's that percentage of people, if you give them a plate of gold, they want a plate of silver. And we have probably 5% of the population of St. James feels that way. We completely turn that town upside down to make a beautiful little city out of it. And today, I'm probably the town's worst enemy to a few people. The other way is I'm the town's hero, because we have built the thing that they all like, and it's been good for the community. It's not easy. It's a deep situation in a community that size where you try to change everything so quickly. That was a mistake that we did. However, we've outlived it, thank heavens.
You developed things too rapidly.
We did. We went right at the man was at the age, our boss, Mr. Hayes, at the age that he was, oh, he was 75 years old.
At the time.
65, 1965. I had to get it done. At least he wanted it done, because we strived to do it. And we got it done. So the gentleman who followed him was a much better and more leisure man to work with.
It seems to me one of the other unique features of your operation is the fact that you have a balance within 6 miles of a basically rural park atmosphere and one of an urban type environment in the middle of town. So you have an opportunity to operate both ends of the spectrum here.
You know, that's why you're called brilliant, Ron, because that's exactly the whole point of the thing. We knew the land belonged to the people of St. James, and she left it in her will. Mayor Maxwell always be left in the care of considerate hands and open for private control and for the use of the public. Well, if you had lived in this community, like many have lived many years, that's our park, that's our piece of land. We're not going to share it with the blacks or the Mexicans or the Puerto Ricans or anyone else. That was a growing thing we had to do. So we knew then we had to build a plan around the total population. So we set our sights on the population, say 40,000. St. James is 3,000. We built our parklands to handle, at that time, around 40,000 people. And of course, we've got it now advanced to around 60,000 people. So, as you say, that has to be thought of. It's not the number one trait, no one facet in the park business as far as I'm concerned.
Ford, I've visited you in your home, and I've played in your backyard.
Uh-oh.
Tell us about your backyard.
I really hate to get into these personal things.
Well, I think what it points out, and it's a very good question, is that you not only are able to be a park and recreation professional, but you know how to recreate.
True.
Should we all have the advantages you have of a backyard like this?
I should think that every park and recreation director should have a backyard like I have.
I think so. So let's be specific.
I have a nice workshop in my backyard, in my back of my house. It's about a 30 by 20 building. It's air conditioned, got a covered radio, TV in it, heat, and I have everything I want there, because I figure that's really the one thing that can help me enjoy myself later in life. I built a home right on a golf course, And also built me a lake right next to it that holds numerous bass and catfish. So I can either work in the shop, or I can go fish, I can go in the house and read, or I can argue with my sweet wife on the two. But anyway, it's nice. I got a beautiful yard. They call it the Hughes Park, incidentally. I'm not trying to get into any personal issues here, but I grow a garden, and it's all right within a 3-acre piece of ground. I've had people drive out to see it just to say, boy, this is the prettiest piece of land we've seen, which makes me feel good.
Sure. I think the other unique thing here is that Betty Lou had been a librarian, and
Yes.
so you were working almost side by side, and the fact that you could go home and recreate, and I know she plays golf, I'm not sure she fishes, but the fact is that you have your hobbies together as well as being able to work together.
We've been a unit. She has her things, and I do my things, and they have never run across or anything each other yet, and it's been a very pleasant life. Parks and Recreation's given me that life.
Tell us a little more about your family.
My family, I have a son who has a master's degree in engineering, civil engineering and engineering management. He's actually a microwave engineer, and he's right now a general manager of General Communications in Alaska. He's been many other things that is real well for him. He has 2 grandchildren there, and he also has a wife. My daughter is a master's degree special education person who's in charge of marketing for Boys Town, Missouri, which is a very large institution. That's my family, a boy and a girl, and they all do very well.
All committed to helping people. Very
They've all
interesting.
got their masters and tried to beat their dad, but they're not as smart as I am.
It's called wisdom.
Just kidding.
Wisdom.
Ford, we can't leave this discussion without talking about the formation of the symposium series that the James Foundation has supported. And I suppose that would be enough of a lead-in for you to take and talk for about another 2 hours about that. So why don't we just let you discuss that with us maybe at this point.
I wish I could really, I'll try to get as deep as possible on this. I grew up wanting me to be part of the national concern and the state concern. First, I learned the state set up at Missouri Park and Recreation, and they made me president one time. And we did many, many nice things. We started scholarships, we started learning programs, workshops, and it turned out to be great, and my board backed me 100%. And they said, you need money, here it is. And of course, it was good for Missouri too. And then I got interested in national concerns, and one day my board member says, why don't we have a symposium? Well, I didn't even know what symposium meant, so I looked it up in the book. And I said, fine, that's what is it, you know. He says, you find how much it would cost to have it since 1977 on, and let me know how much it would cost. So I went back and figured out it cost about $10,000 or $11,000 to put up with these people. And I asked some people to help me, but you've been on the committee for a long time. Have them come, sit down in a control group and study take subjects and really work them out. Not just through a 30-minute class session, but over lunch, over a picnic table, or wherever. And this is where we had them. And it has grown and grown and grown. We've had numerous symposiums, and my board has always been very, very pleased with it and very active to help. I think the American Academy come along, and we supported that with numerous dollars. I won't give the amount, but they thought that was a great thing, and still do. And I think, Tony, you're in the process of working up something, I hope, for everybody in the very near future. So our importance in national parks and recreation, I say, is getting very deeply. The number of people we've touched.
Ford, what was your concept of what you were trying to do? What was the commitment? It wasn't just to have a symposium. What were you trying to accomplish?
In the will of Mrs. James, who was a very brilliant lady, I haven't told you about her, but she had the Dun Bradstreet money and left it all to this fund, the New York Community Trust. And one of her basic 7 ideas was education, and education in parks and the medicine and social welfare and these sort of things. Well, the board strives in that institution to do what the donor wanted done. And education actually built so much in the park that there was money left over. And of course, you have to spend it. And it was a great idea to come up with. And it was from that idea that she wrote in her their wills that if we can have one person, or one child, or one man, or one family gain something in life through some type of education, this is what you want to do. What better way would have been than I thought, Parks and Recreation. And the same gentleman who is the chairman of the Goldman Sachs Exchange in New York City, he got the credit for the idea, which is what it's supposed to be, I think. And he says, let's do it. And this program keeps evolving and has evolved up to we've had eight that we've called the in numbered symposiums. We've had the one with the Academy twice, and we're looking forward to another one next year in Myrtle Beach, and I hope a little later on. We got them scheduled up to 2004 if we all live that long.
You're going to help with all of those, I hope.
Well, I plan to. At my age, I expect I'll be right in the middle of it.
Good.
In thought, I think. I hope. But that has been a beautiful thing for the Parks and Recreation segment of our country, and I think the Foundation and the New York Trust really has appreciated the results of this show.
Why don't you describe actually what happens at the symposiums? How many people attend? What kinds of topics? What kinds of issues have you covered over the years?
Our normal symposium has about, Ron on the committee, 35 to 40, something like that. First we get together and...
Invitees, by the way.
Invitees. And we get together and decide what we're going to talk about. One was, what's the name of it? I don't remember. We cover management, we cover buildings, we cover land, and
current topics.
Current topics that's going on in the community, right. And these three people generally select one division and plan 4 or 5 sessions. We're together for 2.5 days. And they get the people to speak, they do all the legwork, and we provide the places for them, we feed them, and take care of them, and the essence or the printing of it is done by us, which we have a record of it, and anyone wants to use it can. It's very useful in a lot of cases.
I think it's also provided an opportunity for the people that have had an opportunity to be involved in this to visit other park agencies around the United States and have this interchange of not only, say, current topics and management techniques, but to see other operations.
Right.
You mentioned Bob Reed's and the Springs Foundation in Myrtle Beach.
Park.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Dallas, Texas. There's no, in my opinion, you go hire a guy to do some work for you from a consultant viewpoint, pay him a lot of money. But I don't believe you get more than you get out of 40 or 50 minds like Ron and yourself and others in our field if you got them together, let them discuss it. I felt really bad about that because I used a lot of that.
Well, I'll show you how perceptive you are. I think the last time we were in St. James for the symposium, you didn't let us out of town until we filled out a questionnaire that gave you the opportunity to screen the best 5 ideas that we thought you hadn't done yet.
That's
and I'm
correct.
sure that you've implemented some of those.
With those 5 items, where one was signage, another was handicap facilities, some road work, and a few little hazards, and believe you me, that got done quickly. And it didn't cost us other than just to feed it to 3 days.
I mean, we were consultants when we came in on that project.
Well, this is one of the things that you might as well use it, in my opinion. But these programs have been great, and I certainly hope they continue, as long as we're able to continue.
I think it's interesting that the foundation itself has been very, very instrumental in development in St. James.
Yes.
But this view is really national in scope, and perhaps even international, and I think that's a unique combination of viewpoints on the part of the foundation.
If it were such that we were in probably a larger locality, we were probably more involved in international recreation programs. We belong to the World Leisure Associates and try to keep up a certain amount of repertoire with them about their work and trying to find out what's going on. There's other groups too that like to receive money from us, but we like to keep our money at home as near as possible and keep it in the city of St. James and the United States. I think that's our basic idea.
What advice would you have for a young person entering the field today? If you were, as I know you've done, you've spoken to students on many occasions, what would you tell our viewers today about this field and the future?
I think perhaps the most important thing to tell these young people is first they ought to want to be outside and with people. Now, unless you've been around people very much, you don't know what I mean, but you have been around people. You know how cantankerous and how aggravating it can get in many different people. But I would say the love of people first, to want to help them. Secondly, desire them to learn about the many things people do. You can't learn about land, and you can't learn about all the items that go with making up a park, but you can certainly learn logistics, the handling of people, the traffic of people, to make them more happy in what you're doing. This is one of the biggest things we do. We spend much of our time trying to implement programs. We even milk cows, Tony, and have a dairy day down there. Of course, had to go a while real big in the middle of Baltimore, but that's something that's a lost art. We have the blacksmith guy come in. We have what we call orientation programs for people. They go on all year round, and we try to do everything we can to reach as many people as we can, because this lady wanted that done, and I wanted it done too. So that's why the young person going into the field of Parks and Recreation should have a pretty good idea what he really wants to do. I don't know what the turnover is in recreation people, but we searched for some people to take my job, and it took a long time to finally found one. Has the traits of going about forestry, learn about wildlife and people. Right now we probably have 1,000 deer involved with probably 2,000 people every day. So far no one's been kicked or bitten, but it is a problem.
Sure.
Because deer will hurt you. These are minor things, I'm sure. We have a huge fishing area, and we've even had deer butt people into the water, which is a liability. But the Missouri Department of Conservation says don't touch them. So what do you do? There's ways to get around it, and we've had to learn to do that. But I think getting all the subjects that's offered should really pertain to people use and people factors as being the basic part of like any of the strength in park recreation.
I'm sure reality hasn't set in yet with you, but the announced retirement, your announced retirement here in a couple of weeks. As you reflect on your career, is it a fair question to ask you what you feel are most significant changes from, say, the mid-50s to here we are in the 1990s, 10 years from the next century?
Yeah, it's different, quite different. We've got tennis courts that have dropped to the wayside. We've had ball courts dropped to the wayside. People, the young people particularly, like the music style. A little bit faster paced fly. But fishing doesn't mean anything to them. But they like to get in a group and like to talk. You could bring 10 people in this room of our area, and they'd like to sit down on the floor and visit. And if you want to do something, that's the way they start doing it. So the volunteers we have, we got away from this old adage of come out and see our park and it's located so we don't even do that anymore. They have to have something that's mobile. They got to have the music box with them. They got to have the T-shirts. It's just a faster pace of life than I'm used to or would know about because I'm not that age. But we have young people on our staff who's trying every day to do the things these young people like to do. And they like to climb hills. They love to walk. We got a walking population in our area. And picnics really doesn't mean anything anymore. Family picnics, yes. Family reunion, yes. But the age group coming on now, I think you've got a little problem with really what you're going to do with all of them. At home it's a little easier, but I don't know programs yet that they will be hanging on to, which we call a real solid park recreation program, referring to fishing and things like that.
Do you have any predictions, or what does your crystal ball look like for the next 10, 20, 30 years in this field?
Well, I believe that we need to strengthen our state associations. We need to strengthen the awareness, the involvement of those in graduating from parks and recreations into more of a cohesive unit trying to service people. I say many times, we serve more people per person than any doctor or lawyer or engineer in the whole world. We touch more lives. So for some reason, we need to get more cohesive in the idea of doing that. Not just to have a beer or two and go off and have a good time, that's not like that, but we need to be unified in our efforts. It's the biggest thing I can see. We got to have the general contact with the employee, the graduate with the mayor and the city manager and the city council. They're still the one that call the shots in the municipality. In my work, either one of you could do my work. I'm not just kidding, but I mean, we don't need that background. It's planned out for you. Whereas if you follow me, if a kid come into the municipality as a director, I'd say, man, he's got a lot of problems. He can't get along with the mayor. So the first thing is get along. No matter what you do.
Competing with a lot of other interests in the
correct.
Do you have any advice for somebody like that in a small P political environment?
Well, I think that I don't know what your curriculums are. Unfortunately, you may have them, but I believe at least a third of their curriculum studies should be based on government and municipality relationship with churches, with schools, with every type of organization that's competing with you. You know, the Kiwanis Club's competing with you every day. The Lions Club, for instance, Friends of the Land in our area, they're competing with what we're trying to do. And the more you have of that, the tougher it's going to have for some young man to get his feet on the ground. I think he needs to know about that before he gets out. That makes sense. But they just have to realize those things are out there. That's life. We're not going to change it very fast.
What are you going to do now in retirement? Besides play golf, you're going to get sharpen your game and take some more of my money. I'm sure that's going to happen.
You're getting a bad reputation about the money. I'm going to take about a month and stay with my wife. She has complained for 45 years that I'm never home. I'm going to stay a month under her feet, and then she can kick me out and do what I want to. But after that, we're going to, I'm writing 2 books, in case you didn't know that. The history of the foundation that will be coming out probably the first of the year. And I have a book called The Sleeping Giant, which is a fictional story of the Merrimack Iron Works. It's a 50-year period of all the trials and tribulations of why that land existed. And I hope to add a little bit on why the land is like it is today.
You've traveled a lot. Are you planning to do some travel?
Yes, yeah, we'll probably hit Alaska time here where my son lives, and we love Hawaii, and looking possibly at buying a condo over there. We seem to like the western part of the world more so than the eastern part of the world. I get more invites to come see people from the east than have from the west. We may visit a month to the east.
Okay.
Get caught up. About in working in the shop, I enjoy woodwork and things like that. And keep in touch with symposiums, work with the foundation a little bit, some consulting for them, and try to make every NRPA convention I can for the Maple Wall.
I would predict that you're much more active with the symposium and with the profession than you think you'll be at this point.
I don't know. It's hard to say. I'd like to see him continue.
This man is a unique man in terms of his commitment to individuals, to the development of people, to the development of students, to the development of the professions, and he's been in a unique opportunity, a unique setting, Ron, in order to accomplish that.
Certainly, he's a friend of not only Parks and Recreation, but those of us that know him personally. It's a real tribute to us to be able to applaud him with this tape, and we certainly wish you and Betty Lou the best. And we know that you're not really going to retire. I think, as Tony has said, we're going to be seeing more of you because you're going to have now more time to spend with the symposiums and at the national conventions, and maybe to come up and consult with us when we need some help.
Yeah, you don't need much myself. Anytime I can come around to me, we'd play golf with you probably.
I'm sure.
Oh, that would be okay.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Well, it's certainly been a great pleasure for Ron and I to have an opportunity to introduce Ford Hughes to you a bit more than you may have known already, because he is truly a legend in our field.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Ford.
Thank you both very much.